Hey guys, it's Alyssa, and today I am joined by a very special guest. I have been obsessed with her books. It is best-selling author and international best-selling author, Penn Cole. Oh my God, I'm so starstruck right now.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super, super excited to be here.
Girl, we have a lot to talk about.
Good. Let's get started. I'm excited.
First of all, you're in Paris.
I am. Yeah.
Tell me about that and how that came to be.
Well, it is a very interesting story. So when my husband and I'm from Texas originally. My husband is from Louisiana. When we first got married, we were both, absolute workaholics. And so we started taking French classes as just a date night thing that we would, set aside this part of our week every week to take French classes. And it was just our little thing that we did together as newlyweds. And so on our first anniversary, we said, okay, well, let's take a trip to France and let's see if we've actually learned anything. So we were in France and we were walking around kind of joking, like you do on vacation. What if we lived here? Like, what if this was our apartment and this is where we bought our groceries? And over the course of the trip, we were like, wait a minute, like, what if this was where we lived and this was our apartment? And we were at a weird space in like a very transitional space in our life. My husband works in tech startups and he had just sold his first company. I was in a job that I could kind of do from anywhere. And so he went back and he, talked to the people at his job and said, hey, could I work remotely from France? And we were both stunned when they said, yeah, sure. Like, no problem. And then we applied for a visa. And we were like, well, surely like we won't get a visa or it's going to take months or whatever. And literally 1 week later, our visa got approved. It's like the fastest visa approval in the history of immigration. Um, and it just all kind of everything fell into place like weirdly easily for us. And that kind of told us, all right, this is where we're meant to be. So we moved here in 2012 and we lived here for several years. And then we moved back to the US because of my husband's work. And then during the pandemic, we kind of had this moment of reassessment. Like I was working as an attorney, working about 1 million hours a week. He was still working in tech. And we were just so unhappy. We were very much like living to work instead of working to live, and putting in so much of our life in these offices and jobs we hated. And we said, well, the last time we remember being happy is when we lived in France. And let's go back. So in the middle of a global pandemic, we applied for a visa again. We got approved again, and we came back in 2020. And we've been here ever since.
Okay, that is an amazing story. You literally did what every American wants to do whenever they
Yeah.
go and travel to whether it's like Italy, Greece, France.
Yeah.
They're like, I would love to live here. You did.
Exactly. We're super lucky that like we didn't have kids or we didn't have family members that needed to be taken care of or like there's a lot of things that kind of keep people rooted where they are and we just didn't have any of those factors. And we said, okay, well if we're lucky enough to be able to do this, like let's do it.
No
So
kidding.
we took the leap and it was the best thing. I mean, if you sit with me for 20 minutes, I'll talk you into moving abroad because it was like the best thing we ever did. It was so much fun. We learned so much about each other, about ourselves. It really expanded our worldview so much. It like changed my life.
What has been your favorite thing that you've done so far in Paris?
Oh my gosh. That's such a big question. I think one of the things that I love most about living here, well, first of all, the work-life balance is so much better. Like they really prioritize having hobbies and spending time with friends, weekly instead of just seeing your friends every few months, like I think so many of us do. And, setting aside weekends for yourself. Truly people have lives outside of their jobs here, which I feel like as an American is a novel concept.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the thing that I love most about living here is just how international our friends group is. Like we have friends from so many different cultures and countries and different, native languages and worldviews, people who've lived through some crazy things. Coming from the South, especially like Texas, it very much feels like a bubble sometimes where it's very homogenous and like a lot of people who look and think just like me. And I love being around here from people who are just so different from me and really like having to check all of the assumptions and biases that I have and see the world in a very different way.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure there's a ton of stuff to do in Paris.
Yeah, there is.
So,
There's always something.
can you tell me a little bit about yourself and your author journey? And you were a lawyer before this.
I was. I actually have always wanted to be an attorney. And like from my very youngest age, was writing stories, and my favorite classes were always the ones where I got to write. And so I knew from very early on that I wanted to write books. I got my undergraduate degree and a graduate degree in writing. And I intended to go into publishing, but publishing really favors like Ivy League expensive, like Northeastern schools. And I just did not have that kind of money growing up. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll work a few years while I save up money to move to New York and pursue a dream of in publishing. And of course, as it does, life happens and you blink and 10 years have passed and your dream is still sitting there on the back burner waiting to be pursued. And so, my life took me in other directions, but it was always this thing that was like hovering over me saying, this is still your dream. Like, you still want to do this. And it really wasn't until the pandemic, and I actually had to leave my job when we moved back to France, and I found myself unemployed and I was applying for jobs and not getting them, that I said, okay, maybe this is a sign. Maybe I'm not meant to be an attorney anymore. And it was actually my husband who said, you've always wanted to write a book. You've got some free time now that you're unemployed. Why don't you use some of it to write? And so I did. And I self published my books originally, thinking no one would ever read them. Thinking, okay, well, this will just be a fun hobby that I have, like writing books and putting them online, and maybe a few people will read them. And no one was more surprised than me when they actually took off and became pretty successful pretty quickly. And last year, I was approached by Atria, which is an imprint of Simon and Schuster, and they wanted to buy the rights to the print rights to the series. And so I sold to them last year, and they re-released in hardback as trad published books at the end of last year. And so it's funny, they're getting this whole new kind of second birth into the world. So even though I've only written 3 books in my first series, it's been a very long process of like writing them, publishing them, republishing them, and still continuing to work on the final book in the series.
There were so many versions and so many languages. It's like
Hmm.
you get to share the Kindred's Curse saga with the entire world.
Yeah, we've got 18 translations in process now, which is mind blowing, and tons of different special editions. I think by the end of this year, there will be something like 32 different versions of Spark, which is crazy to say. It's absolutely surreal coming from somebody who started as just like a self-published author with no money, no followers, like literally sitting on my couch clicking publish, hoping someday somebody would read the books.
I feel like that's every indie author's dream is to just have this massive book deal that they can just take their books across the world.
Yeah, I there's been a lot of discourse about this lately about like indies transitioning to trad and whether or not it's a good thing or not. I feel very blessed that my I would consider mine to be kind of the best of both worlds because I'm still indie and ebook, but I have a trad publisher for the print edition. And so I feel like I have a foot in both worlds, and I still maintain a lot of control over my books because I own the ebook still. But I have really great support from Atria to promote this series as well because of the trad books. So it's a very interesting path, but I think for me, it really is like the dream of where I want to be positioned in the business.
Can we maybe expect some sprayed edges in the future?
The paperback versions, actually, hold on, I'll grab them right here. So
Oh, they
the paperback
do.
versions have sprayed edges. They come out in 2 weeks on June
Ooh.
3rd. The hardcovers are out now, but these are the paperbacks that are releasing in the US, and I'm really excited about them.
Oh my
So,
God, those are so cute. So I
gorgeous.
need physical copies because I actually listened to the audiobooks and I read my ebooks when I was just like, oh, what's this series? I was kind of in a slump after one of my other romantasy books, and I was like, I need something to fill this void. And then I found the Kindred's Curse Saga, and I feel like that made it even worse.
Good. I love to hear that. I know
But
readers hate it, but I love knowing I put somebody in a slump. It's like the greatest compliment you could give an author.
it's like emotional turmoil. Do you drink readers' tears for breakfast?
I really do. I have this is a gift from one of my readers, Tears of My Readers here, this mug. I do. I enjoy it. When people tell me like I'm sending you my therapy bills, I'm like, add them to the stack. Like I love it.
God. For those who are not watching the video right now, she actually held up a coffee cup that said reader's tears. That's amazing. Okay, let's talk about romanticy.
Yeah.
I was talking with Lauren Roberts earlier, and we were just saying how thankful we are that romanticy is this coined genre and it's so popular now.
Yeah. It's so interesting because I've been reading romantasy for 20 years. Like I think a lot of people see it as of this new trend, and it certainly is having a huge resurgence right now. And it's the term romantasy I think is newish and is certainly like we're hearing it now and we didn't before. But this idea of a kind of a niche in between romance and fantasy that in particular is like really heavily dominated by female authors, female readers, and stories about female protagonists. It's something that has been really growing over the last 2 to 3 decades. And I love seeing it have this huge explosion right now. I think it's so needed at this point with everything that's going on in the world. There used to be a time when, you would walk through bookstores and then in the fantasy sections, you wouldn't see much stuff that was really catered towards more of a female heavy audience. And now it's almost like the reverse. Like you go in and the fantasy sections are dominated by a lot of books with strong women written by women. And I love that because I remember the days when we really had to scrounge to find it.
Yeah, one thing I love is that reading is cool again,
Hmm.
and we're not just the nerd sitting in the corner reading our fantasy books. We're so weird. Like, no, we're actually popular now because romantasy is huge.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people, there were a few mega bestsellers that have come out over, or at least that have like blown up over the last 5 or so years. And those became these gateway books that brought so many people back into reading. And they saw everybody freaking out about it on social media. And they said, okay, I got to know what this is about. And it like reminded them, oh, reading can be more than schoolwork. It can be more than like this chore. It can actually be really, really fun. And it's just brought so many people back to reading. And I think it's a wonderful thing.
And what I love about romantasy, yes, it can be smut, but a lot of times it's got a ton of plot and the romance just builds up to that point. But there's a ton of politics and a lot of corruption that you can actually learn something and maybe some morals.
Yeah, it's really a spectrum. I mean, we do have definitely the stuff that's just there to be fun, and we love that. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. But on the other end of the spectrum, you have books with a lot of social commentary, like a lot of discourse about some really complex topics. Um, I think one of the wonderful things about fantasy is its ability to tell a message with a story and have kind of this underlying um, issue of like a society that often mirrors something that we have in our world today. And you really get to examine the problems with it and the flaws with it in a way that's like divorced from all the baggage that maybe we would bring in. So, like, it's not in America where you would come in, if you're an American, maybe feeling defensive or feeling loyal. It's just this fantasy world. And you can be critical of it and you can say, this isn't right, or, this is whatever, and have feelings about it, and then maybe close the book and look at the world around you in a different way and say, oh, like actually I'm seeing those problems in my home as well, and maybe that I should act on that, maybe I should do something about it. And it's such a great genre for having a lot of fun and like great entertainment, but also really making you think deeper about the world around you.
One thing I love, maybe hate at the same time on social media is people get so butthurt over the little things that happen in books. And it's like, guys, it's not real.
Well, art done well, I think, invites discussion and it invites polarizing opinions because
Hmm.
if there's something that everybody likes, it's probably not that deep. You know what I mean?
Right.
Not, that's not like a commentary on anything that's really popular, but it's really hard to make something of substance that doesn't automatically generate like a lot of haters.
Hmm.
And so in many ways, I think when you get that kind of discussion, it's a reflection of the good job that the author did of like giving people something to talk about. But also, artists are not immune from criticism. Like there are a lot of worrying trends sometimes in authors or in books, and I think it's lovely that we're at a time in history where we can have these conversations out loud with everybody participating, encouraging all of us to be better and do better.
Yeah, as a former TV host, I was in front of the camera. I was getting all the criticism that people
Yeah,
could
I
throw at
bet.
me. And you just kind of got to brush it off at the same time and be like, that's your opinion. I'm going
Yeah.
to just continue to do me.
Yeah, it's one of the hardest things to balance listening and hope, and being open to accountability where it's justified, but also shutting your ears off to the criticism that's just somebody's got an opinion. You know what I mean? Somebody thought your protagonist was too fill in the blank, and everybody's got an opinion on that, and you
Yeah.
have to just put your head down and focus on your art.
Yeah, absolutely. So let us go into Spark the Everflame, the Kindred's Curse saga. This is a spoiler-free kind of version. We're going to get into spoilers in a little bit here, but what sparked the Kindred's Curse saga and how long have you been working on it?
I started working on it in it was like the tail end of 2019, but pretty much 2020. And I spent about 2 years writing the first three books. And I started, like, I wrote them in order mostly, but I really was going back and adding bits and pieces to all three as I was working on them. So I kind of look at those first three books as almost like a joint project. It wasn't one of those things where I had the idea sort of in my head for years and years. It was more that I decided I wanted to write and I knew I wanted to write a romantasy. So I sat down and I have a little notes app in my phone where I write any story idea that I get. Anytime a scene pops into my head or an interesting character or just some little bit of world building lore that I think would be cool, I just pop it into a little note. And I sat down with my, 20-page long note app thing and I said, okay, how can I pick as many of these ideas as I can and craft them into a single book that is really interesting, that is refreshing, and not just kind of like a cookie cutter of everything else we've seen. And I can't say it because it's a spoiler, but one of the first things that I thought about was what happens at the very end of Spark, the kind of big twist at the very, very, very tail end of Spark. That was actually the first scene that I thought of. And it made me think, okay, what does a world look like where this is a thing that could happen? And what are the consequences of something like this happening? And that got me thinking about world building and cultural stuff and all of that. I really like to start with the world first and then think about what characters inside that world are compelling. And so that sort of sent me on a spiral of like building this world in my head. And I sat down for probably, I don't know, a few days and just sketched out the world and, the people, the magic system, all of this stuff. And then thought about what are the characters in it that I want to follow. And I plotted the entire series over the course of a couple of days and then started writing. And yeah, like I said, spent a couple of years writing it.
So you wrote Spark within a few weeks, right?
Well, so I started actually with Glow.
Oh,
I originally, what happens at the end of Spark is one of the very first scenes that you read. And we start basically, Glow was the beginning of Diem's story. And I wrote the first half of Glow first. And then I said, no, this isn't right. We need to see before. We need to see Diem's life before the world kind of explodes and everything changes. And, you know, she's forced out of this little bubble that she was raised in into this greater world. Um, and that's how so many fantasies start, with some huge incident that forces the protagonist out of their little village and into, the magical world or the big city or whatever. And that's how I started writing the series, because that's how I'd always seen it done. And as I was writing, I said, this is wrong. We need to start earlier. We need more. And I threw that all away. And I went back and I started over again. And then I started writing Spark. So it was a little topsy turvy how I started it. But yeah, I drafted Spark in about a month.
wow. That's incredible. I mean, it
Yeah.
takes authors sometimes a year to 2 years to write a book, and you wrote yours in a few weeks.
Well, I'm making up for it now in the later books. It took me 8 months to write Heat, and then, going on a year and a half to write Burn. So I think the beginning is really easy in the sense of like, there's no restrictions on you that you didn't put there yourself. And so you can just create and you can try new things, and every new chapter is a chance to like build a new character or add more to the world building. And I love that phase. I love the phase that's really about generating new ideas. I struggle a lot more with the later books where it's like, okay, now I'm like in this little cage of rules and plot and all of these things I've laid out in the previous three books, and I don't have a lot of wiggle room. How can I still tell a really compelling story inside of this box?
Do you feel a lot of pressure to write Burn?
An immense amount of pressure. Yeah. Intense. I was a wedding photographer previously, and that's a lot of pressure because like if you screw up, there's no fixing it.
Yeah,
And then
that's
I
one
was an
big day.
attorney. Yeah, I was an attorney where I had, people's rights in my hands, and, was working on $1 million, $1 billion deals. And none of it feels like this kind of pressure. This is so much more, because I feel, number one, I feel incredibly grateful to the readers for, helping lift this book out of obscurity. Like, I didn't have a big following. I didn't have a huge advertising budget or like a lot of promotional help. And it was really just readers who talked about the book, and like they are the ones that really made it successful, not, anything I did. So I feel incredibly, like, I feel a real sense of responsibility to give them a good ending and to give them a final book that makes up for, number one, the wait, and number two, how much they have supported me.
Well, you have a reader right here who would just love to live in your brain.
Oh, it's a mess up there.
I just want to know all of the story ideas that you have because they're all brilliant.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, getting into spoilers
Yeah.
for the Kindred's Curse saga. So if you have not read Spark, Glow, or Heat, get out of here. Go read those books. I promise you, it'll be worth it. They are amazing, and you will be as obsessed with them as I am. Okay, do you see yourself in DM?
I don't, in some ways, but not. I think DM is who I want to be. I think she's sort of this ideal of somebody who has the best intentions always and the best motives. Like, she wants to help people, she wants to heal them. She really resists giving into her like darker urges to hurt or to, judge people. um, I look up to her in a lot of ways that I can't relate to. I myself am quite, can be quick to judge and quick to sort of say, okay, well, you burned me, so I'm done with you.
Hmm.
Whereas she'll give people second, third, fourth chances. And I think as frustrating as that can be sometimes watching her, I admire that about her. And I think it's a really rare quality to find somebody who's like willing to believe, to see the best in everyone and believe that everyone has the capacity to like do good and be a good person. But we are, I think we're similar in our like fieriness a little bit and our, being opinionated. I really see myself in her in the confidence that she projects outwardly, but the insecurity and the self doubt that is going on inside of her head. And I think that reflects a lot of women I know who try really hard to project, like, I have it all together. I'm confident. I know what I'm doing. And in private, they're like, I'm a total disaster,
Oh
you
yeah,
know?
I call it fake it till you make it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Okay. We all know, those who have read the book, DM has had a lot of character growth, right? From book one to book
Mhm.
three. And she has made some choices that we may not agree with. And can we talk about Henry?
Oh, my baby. I love him.
Why?
I adore Henry. He is my little wayward sheep. Um Henry is I love him for a few different reasons. Number one, in the book, he his place in the story is kind of like the voice of the mortals. So he speaks for the frustration and the anger that this group of people have at being oppressed for so long, at no one listening to them, at them saying like, we're dying, we're starving to death, like we're being mistreated, and no one's doing anything about it. And he's hit his limit and he kind of snaps and says, if they're not going to listen to us, we're going to make them listen. We're going to make them see us, whether they want to or not. And we're going to do it by any means it takes. And I have a lot of sympathy for that, that approach and that feeling that I think a lot of marginalized groups in our world are at. They're like, you don't listen to us until we're violent, until we break the law, until we sort of disturb your comfortable life. You don't want to look at us and what we're going through, and so we're going to make you do that, even if you think our methods are like unsavory. And there's a lot of things that he says in the book that are direct messages that I've seen in a lot of like social justice spaces. Things like, violence is the only thing that has made people like get their rights back, and that has ended unjust situations. And so, and also there's a big discussion in throughout all of the books of like, do the ends justify the means? What is too much to do when we're talking about like entire groups being wiped away? Um, and so I just have a lot of sympathy for his anger and his frustration. I think he has a really good heart. I think he sees Diem as like, his best friend and the woman that he loved for so long. They grew up together. They were so similar. They had the same values. They've been through a lot together. Um, and he really thought this is the woman he would spend his life with. Like, we're so perfect for each other. And then it's like something happens where their paths really start to go different directions, and neither of them is honest with the other about why or what is sending them in different directions. He's keeping the secret about the guardians, she's keeping all kinds of secrets, and neither of them is telling the other, hey, I my feelings are changing, my opinions about the world are changing. They're kind of lying to each other like, no, 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 nothing's changed, everything's fine, even though it's not fine. um and so when people look at the two of them and they see Henry, they see some of Henry's actions as selfish or as self-serving or like, um, whatever. I see that as a man who's like desperately trying to hold on to this woman that he loves, that he thinks is on the same path as him. And he doesn't yet know that she's really going down a different path and vice versa. So I get that next to Luther, it's hard. I think anybody next to Luther is going to really struggle to win anyone over. But I really think he's a good guy, and I'm rooting for him to find happiness, even if it's maybe not the happiness that he thought he wanted.
Yeah, you did a great job in creating his character because you made us want to hate him. But I also understand because it's like it reflects character growth and relationships, right? Two people can be right for each other at a certain point, but then when you grow as a person, when you learn new things, when you start to change your point of view, one person may be doing that and the other person may be stuck in their ways. And so
Yeah.
that's when they go different directions. And that's what happened here with Henry and Diem, maybe a little bit extreme. Um, Henry, the way that he did it, was not happy about it.
I think if we were in Henry's head, in his POV, like really hearing his internal thought processes and his motivations, we would feel so differently. Like we would be
Mm-hmm.
Team Henry and be like, Diem is so in the wrong. Like this is all her fault. Because to him, it's like this woman, she knows she watched him grieve his mother's loss, and they have been by each other's side as they've watched their neighbors die, get thrown in jail, all of this stuff, and they've all been like, yeah, Descendant are evil. They're awful. And they killed my mother. And, they're responsible for all of this. And all of a sudden, this woman that he proposed to, that he loved, is in their castle, like wearing their clothes, flirting with their prince. And it's the ultimate betrayal to
Mm-hmm.
him. It's like, how could you do this to me? I thought like we loved each other. And here you are flirting with their prince in wearing fancy dresses in the palace, like laughing and having a good time. He doesn't see how much she's struggling internally and how she's really like going back and forth on whether she even wants to be here, or is she, using this as a front to like take down the descendant from within. He just sees his best friend and the woman he loves betraying him. And I, it's just tough. It's tough for both of them. I love them both. As an author, I think you have to love all of your characters to some extent because you have to put yourself in their shoes and understand why they're doing the things they're doing to make them, authentic.
Mm-hmm.
And so, even some of the really awful people in my books, like I know why they're doing the things they're doing, so I'm really sympathetic towards them. So it's hard for me to condemn any of them, honestly.
Hurt people, and that's kind of the whole
Exactly.
thing.
Exactly.
Something happened to them to make them that way. And I
Yeah.
understand what you're saying. When you go into Henry's head, you think that your best friend betrayed you, and you also want to hurt them at the same time. So I
Yeah.
understand. I'm
Yeah.
also kind of hoping for a comeback in Burn for Henry because he was starting to show some promising things.
The last scene we have of Henry in Heat is really Diem putting this choice in front of him, saying, like, I'm with you on this world needs to change. But Vance and his people are not the way to do it. Like, there's a better way. And she really says, like, choose, are you going to go this way or are you going to go this way? And we don't know yet which of those he's going to go with. And that is something that would be explored much more in Burn.
Would you say that's a pivotal moment for Burn?
I think Henry's path is a really big part of Burn. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. So, enough about Henry. Let's talk about Luther. I will get on my knees for you, Corbois.
We love him. We just
Ben,
love him.
I'm obsessed. And I have never been so mad that a fictional character does not exist.
Yeah, he's great. But if he existed, he would only have eyes for DM. So let's all let's
That's
all
fair.
maybe be grateful that we can pretend.
That's fair. So, like, what inspired his character?
Um, actually, I always joke. So, have you read the books Shatter Me? The
Yes.
Shatter Me series? Okay,
Oh
Aaron
my God,
Warner is
Aaron
like
Warner is
he's like
so
my
hot.
favorite. I love Aaron Warner so much. If he weren't 17 and 5'8", I would just be all over him.
Yeah.
He is I love an MMC that's like I hate everyone but her, and no one is more I hate everyone but her than Aaron Warner. He's so grumpy. He's so like I will let the entire world burn. I do not care. I just want you to be happy. And I loved that. Um, but I wanted to do that. I think I love Aaron. I love those books. Aaron is a tiny bit toxic. He is a little bit like, you need therapy, babes. So I wanted to write a like sort of a spin on Aaron that was adult and maybe more well balanced. Like Aaron Warner if he grew up and went to therapy, basically. I wanted that extreme loyalty, that devotion, and that feeling of like, I will let this world burn for you. I don't care. Like everybody else can die. I will watch the all the realms fall as long as you are okay. And so that was kind of the core of what his character was built around. But then I thought it was also really interesting. This series it follows a lot of people who feel like they don't quite belong in the world that they're in. And I wanted to play with that with Luther, and that this is a guy who, on the surface, has everything. He's a prince and he's the heir to the throne, and he comes from the most prestigious family. He has the most power of all of these descended. Like, on paper, this guy has everything going for him. And as we get to know him, we realize like he doesn't want any of that. And he doesn't like see his life in the role that everybody else has put him in. He thinks that he serves some other purpose. And uh, he, I think, is the character who knows himself the least at the beginning of the series. And his journey is really one about finding himself and figuring out, who am I? What do I want? What are my values? What am I willing to sacrifice? What makes me happy? That's not a question he's ever asked himself before, is what makes me happy? Because his happiness felt unimportant to him. And I love that DM comes into his life is this tornado. And I kind of like asked him, like, what makes you happy? Like, what do you want? And no one has really ever cared about that before until her. And it forces him to have a lot of introspection and say, who am I and what do I want? And so, again, that is a big part of his journey. And there's a lot of growth left for him still to come in Burn.
I would say he's probably top five, if not top three, of my
Ooh,
favorite
thank
male
you.
leads. And that Aaron Warner's on that list too. Just because of some of the things he says, like, I'll get on my knees for you. And he's just so
He can give a
supportive of
speech.
DM. Let me tell you though, this was the slowest burn
Mm.
I have ever experienced. And I'm not kidding. I read all of these books in 4 days.
Oh, wow. That
I
is very
binged the
he
crap
alone
out
in
of the
4 days.
series.
Yeah, it's about 500,000 words until we get to some, like real, true, honest, like consummation. So it is a very slow burn. I love a slow burn, obviously, and I wanted to see how long I could push it before readers gave up on me.
I almost feel
And
like that's the best part though, is the tension, the hand
yeah,
brush. I'm feral for like hands
yeah,
touching, long
yeah.
gazes,
The
like
like
all
Pride
of
and
it.
Prejudice Matthew McFadden hand flex scene. I wanted a book that felt like that scene. You know what I mean? Just the entire book, the entire series. I want to bottle up the feeling of that scene and put it into 3 books. Like, and
Yes.
that's what I tried to do anyway.
Like jaws ticking whenever she's like
Oh,
in
oh,
trouble. Oh, all of it.
sucker for it. Love it.
I'm not called the hopeless romantic on this podcast for nothing. Okay. So, of course, we have Luther, and we left on quite a cliffhanger at the end. Luther is distraught. He lost DM. He saw someone behind DM. He doesn't know if she's okay. We know that she got stabbed. Also, we have Ophiuchi, and
Yeah.
everything is just chaotic.
Everything is bad. Pretty much for almost everybody, everything's pretty terrible right now. Yeah.
What can readers expect?
More of that. More pain and suffering. It's pretty dark. Um, we're at so For me, book one is the mortal book, is where we learn about the mortals, the mortal world, and Henry, Mora, the Guardians, all of that. Book two is the Descended book, where we meet the Courbois and the 20 houses, and we learn a little bit more about the politics of this world. Book three is about the realms, right? And going to the other realms, meeting the crowns, seeing this larger world, and also getting a lot of answers to these questions that we've had over the past few books. Towards the end of Heat, you really start getting a lot of answers to all of these mysteries. Book four is about the war, first of all, because the war is like in full swing now. And two, the fallout to getting the answers to some of these questions. Um, it's, I'm like in my head, what can I say without spoiling anything? I think so many of the characters are at a big crossroads where they have to make really, really big decisions. We're having people that have leaned really heavily on certain characters that no longer have that character to lean on anymore. And they're having to find their way on their own, which is really difficult for them. Um, and yeah, we've got a war, and it's not quite as black and white as it once seemed. It's no longer just the mortals versus the descended, because now we have Ophiuchi and Vance and all of their men that are coming in and sort of blowing everything up in a different way. So, yes, it is. I'm so scared I'm going to spoil something. It's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually was lucky enough to read Luther's perspective of like the beginning of Burn, and
Yeah.
he has a beard.
He does. We are seeing rugged, like let himself loose Luther. At the beginning of Burn, it's been a month since the end of Heat. And Luther and Teller are basically in hiding with the Guardians. And he is really, he's not the prince anymore. They don't really see him as the prince. He's just a guy. He is this,
Like one of the worst guys too. They don't
yeah,
trust
he's
him.
this half mortal that they're not sure they can trust, but like Orly says they can trust him. And he is completely left everything that is familiar to him. And so we're really getting to see him explore a very different side of himself in this situation, which I have had a lot of fun with.
One thing that I personally, some of the tropes that I don't like is the separation trope, but when done
Yeah.
right, I think it can be really impactful with the story. And of course, this is DM and Luther, and they're separated. But will Luther and Orly get closer with this journey?
Yeah, I laugh really hard when I see people talking crap about Orly right now. And I get why she's not winning any Mother of the Year awards at the moment. But I think she came in real hot in Heat. But I think I understand why. The last she saw this man, he's threatening her family. He is, making all these comments about the things he could do to her if she crosses him, and she basically has to blackmail him into helping her. And now all of a sudden he's like getting all handsy with her daughter and like talking to her about, you took my crown. Of course she's going to be like, I'm sorry, what? Like, get your hands off my child. And she doesn't trust him. She doesn't trust his motives, which is so understandable based on their history. And it takes her a beat to realize, okay, this guy's genuine. My daughter's feelings are genuine. Honestly, it's a pretty short span of time. It's just a few days in the book that it takes her to sort of like figure out, okay, this is different than what I thought it was. So I think she comes around very quickly, but the fans, the fans, they don't forgive quite as quickly as as Orly does. They're holding a grudge against her. So I think she's going to have to earn the fans' trust back. She's going to have to earn DM's trust back for sure. Um, and she and Luther are very aligned in wanting to figure out what happened to DM and if they can save her. And so for once, he and Orly are really on the same page. And that is going to be really interesting to see.
I feel like that would be if you had a daughter, like your daughter wants you to trust her choice in men,
Yeah.
but until you see it happen, you're
Yeah.
not going to trust it.
And this is the worst possible choice in Arlie's eyes. Like, are
Yeah.
you kidding me?
This is
This
literally like the
guy.
guy with no regrets tattooed across his forehead.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And, she thinks that Luther believed he was going to be king. And now her daughter has swooped in and stolen the crown. And she, I'm sure, is terrified that he wants to kill her, and take the crown. So, of course, she's going to be like very, very reticent to sort of accept him. But she sees how he is with her, and we see them kind of have a resolution at the end of Heat. But at the same time, leopards don't change their spots. So Arlie is who Arlie is, for better or for worse.
I mean, she's a
And
hothead. DM
she
didn't get her
is
genes from anyone else.
exactly. She's spicy. She's a spicy lady. And I've had a lot of fun writing her in Heat because we are in Burn because we haven't seen much of her. We've just kind of she's been this legend, Orly Bellator. And now we're getting to actually see that legend in person. And, as with all legends, the truth can be very different than the reputation.
I'm excited to see her story pan out. Let's talk about some of the side characters. I adore Taryn. He has that like
Yeah.
golden retriever energy.
Yeah, big time. He's just my sweet little himbo. I love him so much. I adore him. I think he's the character that's most like me, so that's probably why he's my favorite. Um, I love him, but I also love that he's not like an empty character. He seems like he might be at first, like he's just happy to be there, fun, goofy, best friend. But as we really start to see in Heat, there's actually a lot of trauma there, and there's a lot that's going on beneath the surface. And that is also something we explore quite a bit deeper in Burn. He's a complicated guy, and we've hinted at it, but we're really going to address it head on.
Well, and I'm scared too because he would die for Luther.
He would die for a lot of people. He would die for a lot of people, and he's the kind to run headfirst into battle. So, it's keeping DM alive is always an adventure, and I think keeping Taryn alive is also quite a big struggle.
No kidding. Well, then we also lost Perth at the end of Heat.
Yeah,
That was
poor
a sad
Perth.
sacrifice.
I know that I know I came up with it, but the last scene of him like kneeling and giving that final salute and then falling over, like that replays in my head at night. I just think, how did I write that? That is awful. We didn't know Perth super, super well, but I think it was kind of what he represented, which is like this descended guy who, with a heart of gold, who was loyal to DM, who wanted to protect the people that she loved. Um, he's just like a good guy in the midst of this world full of bad people. And I think he represented hope for DM in a lot of ways. Like, okay, if there's somebody this good and this like golden hearted in this world, then these people can't all be bad. And there's redemption. We can find a way forward. And so losing him is a little bit like losing like hope, and like a ray of light that's just it was very symbolic of that last ray of light kind of coming out and like losing him at that moment because that's kind of what he represented in the world. I think it's really easy as an author to kill a favorite character, somebody, that everybody loves and get a big emotional impact. But for me, it's not so much what's the biggest impact on the reader, it's what's the biggest impact on the characters left behind. And the way that we lost Perth, like that awful decision that Teller had to make, it's so traumatic for everyone involved. And now Teller has to live with that choice that he made. Luther has to live with knowing that he lived so like Perth died so he could live. Everybody there has to deal with the consequences of that. And I think that's a more compelling story to tell than just killing somebody we love.
That was a beautiful explanation.
Thanks.
That was great. What I love too is some of the side relationships. So we not only have our main characters, but we also have DM's brother and Luther's sister, and also
Hmm.
two Gryverns. It's so
Hmm.
cute.
We have a lot of little side romances going on, don't we?
I'm obsessed. Hopeless romantic. I always hope that people find love. But the fun thing is like the two Gryverns that have been apart for so long.
Hmm. Yeah, we'll see a lot more of that as well in Burn. Um, Grumpy, ornery little Tybalt. He's just so cranky. He's been through a lot. He was not, well treated by a lot of his masters. It's, I don't want to spoil. I have to be really careful here. Um, I think Sarai has been more well treated by her crowns, and she has developed a bit of loyalty and affection for her caretakers. Even though she is essentially a slave and forced into this bond, she has a fondness, for some of them. Tybalt does not. He has no fondness for any of the descended or humans generally, and uh, that is an interesting dynamic that I think will play out. But we will for sure see a lot more of not just them, but all of the Gryverns in the next book.
I love it. Couple more questions. So we see towards the end of Heat that DM is kind of feeling like, I don't know, like a pull to like some darker side. Will we see a darker side of her in Burn?
Well, she does get stabbed in the heart with Godstone at the end of Heat. So I think Diem's future is very much uncertain. Let's just say that. Diem is, nobody survives that. Nobody survives a Godstone dagger to the heart. That's a deadly wound. So it, who knows? Maybe DM's story's already over. I don't know. We'll see.
Somehow I doubt that. Okay. So we've been talking about Burn a lot. There has been some stuff going on with this book. Originally, it had a publishing date, I think 2024.
Uh, Originally, I was trying to get it out by December 2023. Then it
Okay.
got pushed to January. Then it got pushed to June. And then I canceled the release, and I have not given an update since then.
That's fair. I mean, you don't want to keep leading your readers on like that.
That was the thing. This is my first series. I'm learning a lot as I go. I there are definitely downsides to having your first series become successful. I feel like I'm making a lot of mistakes in a very big spotlight. And one of them has been that I realize now I do not work very well under deadline. Normally in my life I do, but when it comes to being creative and creating art, that feeling of a ticking clock makes it really hard for me to like let the story breathe and give it space. And I found myself writing, what I was writing was awful because I was just rushing to get it done. And I had this moment where I really had to sit down and be hard with myself and say, do you want to just put out a book that you think is bad because you need to hit a deadline? Or do you want to take the time that you need to get it right? And even though it disappointed a lot of people and has frustrated a lot of people, I think it was the right decision in the end to say, I need space and I need to not be accountable to anybody but myself in when the book finishes so that I can craft a book that I feel proud of. So that has unfortunately meaned leaving everyone kind of hanging, not knowing when the end is coming. But we're really close now. I feel really good about what I've written, and the end of the tunnel is approaching. So I think it won't be too much longer.
I will be so honest with you. When I was reading the ebook and I got to the end of Heat, it said that the book was already
Yeah.
out in this year. And I was like, awesome, I get to go read Burn. And then
Yeah.
I found out that it wasn't out yet. And I was like, no.
Yeah, I need to update that. That's been on my to-do list for a while. Yeah, it's It is what it is, new author, learning curve. I've learned a lot about myself as a person and as an author over the course of writing this book. And yeah, it's a mistake that hopefully I will never make again. But for now, we're navigating it as best we can.
We're only human. And what I
Yeah.
love too is I love a lot of things, obviously. Um, but authors are creatives. I, as a creative, know that having a deadline is anxiety inducing. It's like, oh
Yeah.
my God, I have to get this done, but it's probably not going to be the best that it possibly could be if I took my time with it. And it's like, do you want a rushed work that's mediocre and not
Yeah.
going to meet your expectations? Or do you just want this brilliant piece of work that might take 2 years? I mean, Rebecca Yarros is doing that.
Yeah. And these deadlines are so fake. Like they're not there for any reason other than just to exist. So why am I being anxious and
Mhm.
like why is my mental health suffering? Why am I unhappy uh for a date that is fake?
Yeah.
That,
And we don't want authors to kill themselves writing these books. I mean, just
yeah.
because we read it in a day doesn't mean that the author needs to push out the next book the next week.
Yeah. And there's so many amazing books out there. Like there's plenty of other fantastic stuff to read while you wait. And I hope that when the book does come out, and hopefully it will be soon, that readers will feel like, I'm glad she took her time because that's the ending that the characters deserved.
Are we thinking this year at some point?
That's the hope. Yeah. That's
Okay.
what we're shooting for.
It'll be a
Fingers
little
crossed. No
Christmas present to
promises,
myself.
but fingers crossed.
No, I love it. Take your time. As I said, what you write is incredible, and I cannot wait to read this story. So, for those who want more information on your journey or they want to buy your books, where can they go?
I am at author Penn Cole on all social media platforms, most active on Instagram. I also have a reader Discord, which you can find a link to on my Instagram or on my website, where I pop in at least once a day to chat with people and answer questions. It's very, very active, and it's not just limited to my books. People talk about all kinds of books in this genre and other genres. Um, I have a website, pencole.com, that has, information on all of my appearances, where I'm going to be, what I'm up to. And I have a newsletter, and I often send out little special things like art or bonuses via the newsletter. So it's a really good place to subscribe if you want to be the first to know things.
That's where I read Luther's chapter in Burn. So,
Mm.
guys, head on over to that.
Exactly.
I love it. So, I mean, we were so excited for this journey. And do you have any book recommendations for people who are in this slump after Heat and are waiting to read Burn?
Oh gosh, I have been really loving Amber Vina Cole's Book of Azrael, the Gods and Monsters series.
I've
So
heard about that.
good. It's so fantastic. It's like Buffy slash Vampire Diaries vibes. Very fun if you are into either of those. If you're in for something that's kind of, well, I would say it's lighthearted, but it's really not. It's actually can be very dark. I love Zodiac Academy. It's
Oh my
like
God.
it's like a crack for romanticy. It's crazy. It's unhinged,
I
very
would say that.
unhinged.
Yes, it's the most unhinged book I've ever read.
Yeah, it's a very campy kind of tongue in cheek. You can't take it too seriously. And it starts off as a bully romance, which I know is really hard for some people, but I will say that aspect of it ends relatively quickly. But it's like the most fun thing. If you're in the mood for something that's like more heavy on the fantasy side, I would say I've really loved um, For She Is Wrath, which I think was Emily Varga. It was so, so, so good. And Danielle Jensen's, it just came out. The second one just came out this week. Why am I blanking on the title? It's like A Curse Carved in Bone is book two. I can't remember the
Oh.
title of the first one, but her Bridge Kingdom series is like, it's romanticy, like
Hmm.
history. It's iconic in the genre. And her new series is really more fantasy forward. So that's been really great. And Tara Mafi, who wrote Shatter Me, also has some adult fantasy that is really fun as well.
Yeah, she's coming out with another Shatter Me book,
It came
isn't
out.
she?
Yeah, it came out a couple weeks ago.
Oh
It's
my
10 years
gosh.
into the future. I need to read it because I've seen some little snippets of scenes with Aaron, and I'm like, oh, my husband. I get to go
I
back to him all
know.
over again. I think it's more focused on, Adam had the little brother.
Oh,
I can't remember
yes.
his name, James. I think it's more focused on James and his
Okay.
story as he's kind of like becoming an adult.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you are in a reader slump and you miss Luther, go and read the Shatter Me series. You're gonna have to deal with Adam first, but you will love Aaron Warner.
Yeah, yeah. It
Did I
is
just spoil it?
YA.
Maybe.
It is YA. So like you have to go into it knowing the characters are younger and it's like very coming of age. At one point, Juliet's even like, we're all 17. Like, who put us in charge? And I'm like, thank you.
Yeah.
Like, thank you for acknowledging that.
I love
Um,
that too. Like in a lot of like fantasy stuff, like Hunger Games, like they're like 16, 17, 18 years old. I'm like, I was still a baby.
yeah, exactly. And they definitely the characters can act very young, but that's appropriate, I think, because it's a YA book. So you just have to go into it knowing that that's the vibes and appreciating it for what it is.
Well, and Throne of Glass is YA too, and that's
Yeah,
a masterpiece.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
YA doesn't just necessarily mean it's bad. It's
I
just for
love
younger
YA
audiences.
books. I love YA books, but I think I hate when I see adults come into YA books and expect it and demand it to be more adult. Like
Oh
this
yeah.
is written for teenagers.
Yeah,
And so don't expect it to be super spicy. Don't expect it to be like dark and gritty. These are themes that are important for teenagers, like coming into your own and coming of age, like figuring out who you are in the world. And so, yeah, you just have to read it with that in mind.
exactly. Well, Penn, it has been an absolute pleasure talking with you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's been super fun.
To the readers who listen, we'll see you later.